Benvenuti a tutti, grazie per essere qui e mi presento, vi faccio una piccola introduzione. Siamo in due oggi a presentarvi l'extended reality di Disguise. Ci sono io, Luca, lavoro per Disguise come Senior Support Specialist per la regione EMA e con me c'è Lanz, che è un Technical Solution Manager, anche lui per la regione EMA. Hi Lanz. La presentazione verrà fatta in due parti. La prima parte in italiano, dove vi presenterò un po' dell'azienda, e la seconda parte con Lanz verrà fatta in inglese, dove faremo un po' un approfondimento sulla parte di XR. Vale la pena dire che al momento non è ancora una gold feature per il software, ma è ancora una beta, ma è in utilizzo costante da ormai quasi 2 anni. Adesso vi faccio vedere un video con una piccola introduzione riguardo a Disguise come società. Allora, il video è volutamente senza audio. Disguise è una piattaforma per creativi e per tecnici, per operatori media server, che vi permette di creare esperienze visuali e live e quant'altro. È nata nel 2000 da una società che si chiamava UVA, United Visual Artists, per diciamo presentare i live di band come Massive Attack e U2. Da allora chiaramente si è evoluta parecchio ed è andata ovviamente a prendere anche altri vertical, quindi altri settori, non solo quello del live. E una delle cose più importanti è che ha creato una community enorme che conta di tantissime persone al momento, e come dicevo non è più ferma solo al live, ma è anche entrata in altri vertical come teatro, installazioni fisse, televisione, eccetera. Riassumendo, Disguise permette di immaginare, creare e diciamo consegnare delle spettacolari esperienze visuali. Come questi sono alcuni dei numeri che caratterizzano Disguise. Ad oggi ci sono più di 5.000 licenze attive per quanto riguarda il software designer, più di 3.500 unità hardware e più di 70 integrazioni all'interno del software. Quindi si parla di altre tecnologie che possono essere integrate all'interno del workflow. Insieme a tutto questo c'è ovviamente un supporto che è un supporto 24 ore su 24, 7 giorni su 7, worldwide, quindi ovunque. Vengono fatti più di 3.000 training ogni anno, ma chiaramente al momento, vista la situazione Covid, non è possibile farli in persona, ma vengono fatti online. Ci sono più di 400 partner che possono consegnare e lavorare con Disguise nel mondo, e tutto questo ha portato a più di 2.000 brand e artisti a lavorare con Disguise e più di 2 miliardi di persone come audience globale. Chiaramente viene considerato tutto l'insieme degli eventi. Dove siamo? Abbiamo uffici quasi dappertutto, la sede centrale è qui a Londra, abbiamo degli uffici a Barcellona per l'Europa e ci sono dei centri di servizio sia a Londra che a Barcellona, poi ci sono uffici in New York e Los Angeles e 4 uffici a Shanghai. Scusate, 4 uffici in Cina, di cui a Shanghai. Cosa significa? Cos'è Disguise? Disguise è software, quindi un software che vi permette di visualizzare la vostra scena con un full render 3D in cui potete piazzarci tutto quello che dovrete andare a fare poi al momento del vostro lavoro, e piazzare proiettori, piazzare LED, piazzare tutto quello che ci sarà nella vostra scena reale, poi lo andremo a vedere più nello specifico. È composto da hardware, quindi a software, fatta la parte di previsualizzazione si passa all'hardware, quindi ci sono 3 tipi di soluzioni. La soluzione Pro, che è quella più per il playback di pixel su grandi superfici, risoluzioni giganti, qualità dell'immagine. Poi abbiamo la GX Range, che è più per il real time, quindi motori come Notch, Unreal e Unity. E abbiamo la versione più piccola, la Plus, che è più che altro per le installazioni fisse, piccoli teatri e magari convention un po' più piccoline. Qui potete vedere alcuni degli artisti o delle realtà che si sono affidate a Disguise nell'arco del tempo, e come potete vedere ci sono tutti i vertical. Ora entriamo un po' nel vivo dell'argomento, di quello che dovevamo parlare oggi, che è l'extended reality di Disguise. Lo facciamo guardando un video per farvi vedere un po' i suoi utilizzi fino a questo momento. Questo è stato uno dei primi lavori in cui è stato utilizzato il full workflow di Disguise. La finale di American Idol, lo show di Katy Perry, che è stato quello un po' che ha dato il via a tutto, ha fatto partire la grandissima richiesta di XR. Questo è un lavoro un po' diverso, questo non è XR ma è un camera tracking con delle proiezioni su un pianoforte per Dave ai Brit Awards. Anche questo è stato molto apprezzato dalla critica, è molto bello. Questo è uno show live fatto per l'Ellen Show negli Stati Uniti. Era un live all'interno dello show stesso con della realtà aumentata, fatto da una società di San Francisco che si chiama All of It Now, che collabora con noi da anni. Questo è uno show in Giappone, anche questo è un televisivo. Questo è un eSports, una challenge di HP Omen fatta qualche tempo fa con un full set fatto XR. Questo è uno dei primi su grande scala, quindi questo è stato fatto nel 2019 in uno stadio, è tutto AR. Questo è più recente, sempre All of It Now per un gruppo coreano, uno dei primi live veri e propri fatti con realtà aumentate in quel caso. Questo è un music video. Questo è un set in Cina su produzione di un film. Studi televisivi, questi sono degli esempi di studi televisivi, in questo caso era per il Super Bowl, quello di prima per Eurosport, questo per Netflix, quindi serie televisive. Questo è un live, anche questo per sempre in televisione. Questo è un keynote, quindi passiamo sul corporate. Questo è un altro, questo era, non ricordo se fosse un esperimento o uno show vero e proprio, ma sempre con XR, sempre a cura di All of It Now. Anche questo è uno dei primi ad essere usciti con la tecnologia XR. Anche questo molto bello. Se volete maggiori informazioni chiaramente potete seguire il link, e adesso direi che passo la parola a Lanz per entrare un po' più nel dettaglio di quello che è XR. To you, Lanz.
Okay, thank you, Brett, first of all, for having us, and thanks, Luca, for that. Luca, you've gone green to myself here. I don't know if you've gone green to everyone else, but you may need to change your camera angle to and from. Are there any questions yet, or should we just get stuck straight in? Do you know, Luca? I'm just going to start talking then. We don't have any questions yet.
No questions so far, Lanz.
Okay, you must have done a good job so far if there's no questions. So when we talk about extended reality at Disguise, it's such a scary term, this extended reality. But what we're really talking about is in-camera screens. Oh, I need to share my screen. I'm not sharing my screen. Share the sound there. There we go. Okay, so now we can see the same screen as Luca had up. So when we talk about extended reality, we're talking about in-camera screens, camera tracking, generative content, augmented reality, and the Disguise workflow. Okay, and I'm going to take you through these 5 steps now. So my PowerPoint has frozen just as I was about to take on to the next slide, which is fantastic. So let's, oh, and now it's come back to me. So we can go on to the next slide. So as soon as you replace green screen with LED walls, the lighting and shadows become real, a lot more realistic. And the reflections become real as well. If you're holding a glass of water, the refractions coming through it are real. If you've got glasses on, the refractions are real through your glasses. It's quite fun when you're watching Harry Potter to see if he's got glasses on. If he doesn't, then it's a green screen. If he does, then it's a real set. But that doesn't matter for us. And I've done these presentations in real life, and people still say to me, but where is the chroma keying? There is no chroma keying going on, okay? You will not have any issues with green spill around the edge of a person. They can have any hairdo. They can wear any color clothes. You know, they can wear green tops. They can wear blue trousers, no problem. And huge environments can be made from a very small amount of LED, and we're going to go through that later on. But one of the most important parts of this is that a presenter or performer can see the environment that they're in. They're using natural eye lines. They can see if there's something coming towards them, they can move out the way. They can point at things. You know, it's a really engaging environment to be in. They know what's going on. They don't need to keep looking at a comfort monitor to see where they are. They can see it around them. And also, this whole workflow puts everything on its head because, you know, typically you do green screen, you have to do post-production afterwards. But in these workflows, the teams need to have put more thought into the story earlier on because they're going to be putting it onto the LED wall. So when the cameraman's looking through his camera, it's a better performance because he can see exactly, you know, is he looking around the edge of something? He's exploring with his camera. The actor can see what's going on around them. The director can see in the camera exactly what's happening. So it just gives for a much better creative environment to be working within. So here, this was a couple of years ago, the Winter Olympics. This young girl, you know, she's just won a gold medal, and they go, right, live TV, off you go. Green screen environment, imagine that, how terrifying that would be for her. But here, everything that she can see, we can see as well. It's an LED environment. You know, she's laughing, she's pointing at the screen. You know, so when we were doing this a couple of years ago, like, you know, this really works. This is something we should keep pushing and keep going on with. So, step 2, camera tracking. Okay, so it's not essential. You can have your cameras static and locked off, but people like their cameras to move, right? It gives for much better performance. So we integrate, we're agnostic to the camera tracking. So we integrate with MOSIS, Stipe, NCAM, NatNet, that's the Optitrax protocol, and 3D, which is an open protocol used by, say, Panasonic PTZ cameras, and lots of other companies use that as well. Okay, so as well as integrate with camera tracking, because we have an LED wall, we can actually put known patterns on that LED wall, and we can calibrate the lens as well. Within about 30 minutes, you can calibrate the lens. Typically, you'd have to send your lens away to be calibrated by a tracking company and sent back to you, but we're speeding all of that up for you. And because you're working within the Disguise platform, which is a 3D simulated environment, you can see how the camera is moving in the space, so everyone has a better feeling of how it's going to be in the real world as well. So next slide. This is one of these calibrations happening. So the known dot patterns are flashing up on the wall. We know how they should look undistorted. So we can understand how they're being distorted by the lens, and we can calibrate the K1, 2, 3 values of the lens and associate in the software. Now, as well as doing lens calibration, we're also doing a spatial calibration of the space. So the LED walls are really difficult to rig perfect, flat, without any, perfect 90 degrees is difficult. So we actually can adjust the position of the walls slightly within the software as well to help you with that. So we now know where the camera is in the space, and inside the disguise software, you'll see your camera moving around. Now, over a protocol which we call render stream, we then pass that camera position to the real-time generative engine. Okay, so whether it be Notch, Unity, or Unreal, we pass that camera data over, it positions its camera in the same place, and it renders frames which we then put onto the LED wall. Okay, it's pretty complex. There's lots of bits going on, and if you've got questions on that, I'm sure we can come back to them later on when I'm inside the software. Okay, but because you're working inside a real-time engine, that means there's no need for rendering. If you want to move a tree, you can move a tree. You don't need to re-render that content all night long. So everything is happening in real time. So everything is sped up. Those creative decisions can be made on set by the director. Creative guys can make the change, and you'll instantly see what effect that has in camera without having to go through all the posts or rendering content like you do with green screen workflow. So augmented reality, also known as the front plate. So we can also render content in front of the performer, okay, AR. Now, because we have LED walls, we can also do something pretty special, which is project what is in AR through onto the LED layer, so that the presenter standing on the stage can see where things are in the AR. Okay, this works a lot better when I'm on a real stage, which I'm sure we can do another day with you if you're interested, from our London office. But that's really great that you don't have to keep referring to a comfort monitor. You can actually see it on the stage next to you, the AR elements. Now, when the camera pans off the LED, of course, you would see the crew and everything backstage. But we have something which we call the set extension, and that allows us to extend the set off the LED. Now, I'm going to show you this a bit later on, but that introduces something else, which another big issue, which is color calibration, because the colors on the LED wall, they've gone through so many different cables, through processors, through LED, through the real world, through lenses and filters. The colors look different to how the set extension looks when we add that. So we do something called a color calibration, which essentially put in different colors onto the LED wall. We interpret those, how the camera sensor sees them, then we apply a color LUT to the LED wall so that the colors are produced correctly for the lens. We'll go through this later as well. And all of the compositing of this backplate, the camera, the AR, all happens within the Disguise platform. So you don't need to be jumping between different softwares or hardware to do any of those bits. So here's an example that Luca already showed a little bit of. This is the Pakistan Super League, and this is just an example of augmented reality that we do. So this was live to 50 million people. It was a 1-hour augmented reality opening ceremony for the Cricket League. So this was 5 cameras. They were tracked with Stipe camera tracking. They were all going through a single disguise machine. Okay, so when you switch the camera live, it switches the position of the camera within that renderer to make sure that we're seeing the content from the correct perspective. So the actual artist should have been standing in the middle of that stage, Bonian, but she never turned up to the event. So the creative team had a challenge on their hands to try and make some last minute content to go in the middle. So some of the scenes have content in this middle area. Some don't, but there should be a full-on band there. But you can see in scenes like this, you know, they've managed to put a flower there instead, which is kind of fun. So the fifth and final part of the workflow is the disguise workflow. So, you know, the software's been around a good 15 odd years, you know, and we can do projection mapping and mapping video to lighting. And this XR workflow we're talking about now is just one element of that. So around it, you've still got all the other benefits. You could put a VR headset on. We work with open VR. So anything that works, say, within Steam VR, like a Vive headset or your Oculus headsets, they all work within disguise as well. So if you're creating content and it's going on a really big building, for example, in a projection mapping, and you're working on content on your small screen and you have a fast movement, it's really difficult to tell how fast that movement is when you're working with it, you know, a few centimeters larger on a screen compared to 60 meters on a building. But when you put the VR headset on and you stand in that environment, all of those things become clear. It's really clear how the content's going to look. So it's not just for the client to see pretty pictures, it's for the creative teams to see how they're building their content. You know, you can also share it with a local council to explain like how the light pollution might affect a road that's nearby, things like this. So VR is a key within disguise as well. So here's an example. So here you can see an LED stage, and he's going to press a button. And now we're adding what I've been talking about, this set extension. So we've made one large environment from a small amount of LED. You can see there's the real-time lighting going on, the camera's moving, so there's camera tracking, set extension, all that's going on. So this is a couple of years old now. So this is what we were doing back then. And there's a little AR element as well that's just coming there. Okay. So just to do a quick recap, extended reality, we're talking about the LED, we're talking about camera tracking, generative content, augmented reality, the disguise workflow. We pull that all together for you, so you're not jumping between lots of different tools. Now, a little example, I'm going to show you a small stage, then I'm going to show you a big stage. Okay, so here we have Meptic that did a small stage for a music festival. So it's just 4 tiles on the floor and then 5 tiles on the wall. So he's standing there, he's turned on that set extension, and you wouldn't know that it was such a small stage. Okay, this could be just a small room. It works for so many different markets as well. You know, this works really well for corporate, for example. It works well for an experience center, for like in a theme park or something like that. And then we've got the example here of an advert. So this was done by a company called Orca in Madrid. And I think this is quite a nice behind the scenes how that comes together. So you can see they've got a large LED curve there. And this is all running on Unreal. They're just using a single camera tracked here. So it's really immersing those actors into the space. They can see where they're meant to be, see where they're meant to be looking. There's the disguise interface. Okay, so Luca, before I go into a bit more technical, do we have any questions yet coming up that we need to answer before I get boring and technical?
Nope, no question so far.
No questions?
Nope.
How many people are watching?
I don't know. You can see from here.
No questions. We need questions. Any questions? Type them in. Okay, so how does it work? So I'm going to get a little bit more technical here. So next slide. So here's a stage which is pretty similar to the one that we just saw. So let's imagine that this LED wall here, 10,000 pixels wide by 1,600 pixels tall, can be run by simple 2 4K outputs, okay? And this ceiling here can also be run by 2 4K video outputs. So that's the physical setup. So how would this look technically? So on the right-hand side, you can see we've got 4 4K processors, 2 for the wall and 2 for the ceiling. And they're being fed by this video matrix here. Okay, now, coming into the center here, we can see the disguised hardware. So at the top, we have the dedicated director. So this machine would have the full 3D environment within it, like we've just seen, and you see everything that's going on, how the camera's moving, how the content's looking on the screen. And that's where you're sitting and operating the show. And that is giving instructions to all the other machines in the network. So underneath the director, you see 2 actor bits of hardware. They're both VX2s. So they're 2 4K outputs. So these 2 4K outputs are controlling the wall and these 2 are controlling the ceiling. And so they're pushing pixels, they're controlling the color. We support the full ASIS film color workflow, up to 60 frames per second, HDR, uncompressed, 444, the full beams down. Okay, and then underneath that, we have something which we call the understudy, which is also known as a backup machine. So that machine is monitoring the heartbeat, the heart rate, the temperature, the frames per second, everything to do with the health of the machines above it. And should any of those machines have an issue, that understudy will say, hey, there's a problem going on. I'm going to take over that role. It will take over what that's doing. It will send a message to the video matrix, make the switch, and then it will go live straight to the output. So if you're doing a live broadcast, you're not going to have any downtime. If you're on set with an expensive actor, you're not going to have time where your LED is down. Okay, then traditionally, that's how we would have done shows. That's we would have played video on those machines straight out. But more recently, we started working more and more with these real-time render engines. So now we have the RX machines. They're the render nodes for the session. So this is creative how these could be applied to a setup. So I've just got an example of how it could be done. So the camera frustum, this render node at the top will be rendering whatever is within the camera's frame, within that camera's frustum. And wherever it passes over all those different outputs, it will be applied to the LED wall. Okay, it's going over a 25 gig fiber network. So that's 25 gig, and it's being fed to all of the machines. That's how it can pass over any of the outputs. Next one down, we have render node wall, I've called this. So this is actually rendering video outside of what the camera can see. We call it out of frustum rendering. And it will be stretched across that output and playing video. And this is more of a lighting technique. So it will be applying realistic reflections to maybe car windows, visors, just generally on people's faces for realistic reflections. And I've applied another render node here for the ceilings. That'll be bringing the lighting straight down, the same for reflections. And we've got a backup node in here as well. So all of this high resolution video is going over the 25 gig network. We've also got a 10 gigabit network switch, and that's for moving assets between your machines. So super fast. And we've also got a 1 gig network in this example. And that's controlling like tracking protocols of the camera, tracking of people. It's how the machines are talking to each other over that 1 gig network. So we can have multiple cameras, but in this example, I've got one down here in the bottom left, and that's being fed Genlock. So everything in the system needs to be going to the same beat of the music. That's what Genlock is. So Genlock's going to the camera, it's going to the machines in the middle, and it's also going to the LED processors. So as they show a frame, we're taking a picture of the frame, and it's all working as one. Okay, Any questions, Luca, or should I jump into the software now?
No questions so far.
No questions so far. Okay, so now I'm going to jump into the Disguise software. So here we are inside the software. You can see in the middle here, we've got the 3D environment. And this is very similar to the example we were just looking at. So I'm going to keep this super basic, high level, but there's three main areas that you spend your time in when you're using Disguise. You've got the stage in the center, you've got your timeline down the bottom here, and then you have your feeds at the top. So this is how you map LED surfaces, video surfaces to outputs. You simply hold Alt, you drag that unwrapped wall to the output of your machine, and you simply slice it up within there to get it to go onto the outputs. Okay, straightforward. So everything within Disguise is context sensitive. So if I right click on the wall, you'll see its position, its rotation, its tracking source. Maybe the wall is moving on a motor. We can see its resolution. This is where we apply the LUTs to the wall. And if I zoom in to the wall, you can see that it's pixel accurate. You can actually see the pixels on the surface there. So when you're moving your camera around, you'll see if you're going to have any issues with moire or things like that going on there. What else? If I right click on the camera, oh, I've got a zoom menu bar at the top here. I don't know how to move the, how do I move that panel? Hide video panel. Oh, I'll leave it there. So we can see what the camera can see in the center here. We can see its position and rotation, and we can see the tracking source. This is where you would assign a tracking source to the camera. Let's move this over here. And down at the bottom here, actually, maybe I can grab, I can just about grab it. There we go. Move that over there. Now we can do this. So in the timeline at the bottom, I'm currently set on test patterns. If I hit Control L, look at all the different layers we can add to the timeline. We've got audio, we've got render stream, test patterns, normal videos, web layers. We can control cameras, we can control DMX of lighting, we can control projectors from inside here. We can trigger things to move. We've got some simple basic effects like blur and fade, kaleidoscope, simple 2D effects, some generative effects as well, like scans and radars. So lots of things. It's not just video that we do. And if I jump along to render stream, you're going to see some Unreal content on the LED wall there. Now, if I just open up the properties of this render stream, which is popped up here, this is how we select render nodes. So I'm just using a cheap machine next to me because I'm at home, but normally this would be a fancy render machine with a lot more power. So if we go to cluster selection, Zotac, that's the name of this PC. And what's controlling that machine? Well, my laptop that I'm giving the presentation from is doing that. And asset, this is the name of the project, the Unreal project that's running. And camera 2, that's the name of the camera within that project there. So if I just Alt-Tab to NDI, so I'm running NDI from that render node, which is on another machine. So I'm going to look over here now. So here we are inside a demo scene inside Unreal that maybe some of you have seen before. It's a popular one. And if I just get straight to it and open up the level blueprints, very technical here. This is a slightly older version of the plugin actually, but I like this because you can actually see what's going on very clearly. So event begin play. When the engine play is hit, we start the capture. So we start capturing the camera within the software. Which camera? You simply go to your scene. On the right-hand side, you've got the list of all the different elements within the scene, and you just drag in your camera from the scene. Then you link up that camera to there. So that's the camera that I want to send to my disguise project. I can delete that because I don't need that. So camera's being tracked, that's being set, it's being sent out of that engine. And when someone presses stop, that stops the capture going over the network. Okay. Now I want to show you something else that I'm doing in here as well. So event tick. So for every tick of the engine, for every heartbeat, every frame that happens, set the intensity and set the color of a light. Okay, what light? That's the target. What light? Well, it's this spotlight here that I also dragged in from my list of lights. Okay, then we have these two nodes here, and these are exposed variables, exposed levels. They're public levels, so they're now floating around on the network for disguise to pick up. Okay. So pretty straightforward. If I open up this here, then you can also set the format, the output format. So currently I'm on my computers at home, I'm just using NDI, but you can set 10-bit uncompressed RGBA up to 60 frames per second on here with alpha, okay, RGBA with alpha. So I'm going to hit play, and that's going to start that render stream to start sending over the network, come back to this machine and go back into disguise. So now you can see the video on the wall there. Now, if I pan the camera over to the left, you can see the LED updating, and you can see the camera's view updating as well. Now it's a little bit slow because I'm just on my laptop, but if I come over to the left-hand side, you can see this looks a bit odd because the video stops rendering because the LED wall stops there, but the camera sees the video continue. So this is what I was talking about earlier, the set extension feature. Okay, so you can continue to pan round that video. So as long as the actor has LED behind them, everything's going to look great. But if they don't, you can continue to pan round. It just means that you won't be able to see the actor because that's actually another layer of video being put in front there. Now, if I pan back into the center here, and then tilt down, you're going to see a spotlight on the floor. Now that spotlight is the spotlight that I exposed the parameters of inside the blueprints that I just showed you a moment ago. So inside the render stream properties here, we have light level and light color. So if I select the light color, we can simply color pick the colors within Unreal from the disguise interface. A super powerful feature. So this is keeping the technical elements to the technical guys that need everything to be happening dead on time, to time code, repeatable. And it leaves the creative people just to be doing their creative thing, not having to worry about if, where, what, when happens on the actual set. They're just keeping their minds in the creative world, not having to deal with LED issues or anything like that. Okay. Now, everything on the timeline is obviously keyframeable. You know, you can add keyframes, delete keyframes, add them back in. So if you hit play, you know you'll get repeatable results every time on set. So if you're recording the same scene many times using the same camera and you need all of the actors to be looking at the right things at the right time, because it's on the timeline and repeatable, it's going to look correct every single time, rather than relying on a render engine to do all of that for you. Okay, so I've kept everything very high level. I haven't gone too deep there. Do we have any questions, Luca? Anything coming in?
No, it's all good.
All good. Okay. Well, if people don't have any questions, let's see. How do I get back to my? There we go. Let's go back there. We can hold on this for a moment, but I guess if no one's got any questions, we could say thank you, Festival, Bright Festival, for having us. Merry Christmas. If people do want to have in-depth software demos, you can either contact sales@disguise.one and talk to one of the team there, or you can contact myself, lanz.short, lanz.short@disguise.one, or contact Luca Manzoni at disguise.one as well. So are there any questions coming in yet, Luca?
No, all good.
All good? Okay.
Yeah.
Are Bright Festival going to come in and take over the show for us? Or
No, I think, yeah, I can just keep the chance to say thank you to everyone, grazie a tutti. Come ha detto Lanz, queste sono le mail se vi interessa approfondire. Una cosa in più da dire è che ogni mese ci sarà, facciamo da un po' di tempo un meeting di users solo per l'Italia, quindi tenete magari d'occhio i canali di Disguise su Facebook o eventualmente scrivete una mail a me per sapere il quando questi incontri vengono fatti. Per il resto chiudiamo qui. Grazie a tutti, grazie ancora a Bright e Claudio per la possibilità e per l'aiuto. Buona serata a tutti.